All right, so hey everybody. My name is Colin Northway. I'm working on a VR game called Fantastic Contraption for the HTC Vive. Thank you very much. We're super excited about it. We're lucky enough to be a launch title for the Vive, which is great, and it's been a ton of fun working on it. And I'm going to talk about some of the more surprising and exciting things in the development. I do want to mention that, obviously, I'm not making the game alone. I'm working with some great people. My wife and I, Sarah, are Northway Games, and we're also working with Radial Games, which is Andy Moore and Kim Vole and Lindsay Jorgensen, and also Gordon McGladdery is doing the sound. So I want to talk about the most, my moment of realization in VR, my come to Jesus moment when I discovered the most important lesson in VR. So Fantastic Contraption was originally a Flash game that looks like this, and it was from 2008, and the new one is obviously very different. But when we started, this was kind of the template. And you can see in this, the way it's a building game where you build stuff. The new one is also you build stuff. You use simple tools, sticks, a couple kinds of sticks, and a couple kinds of wheels. And this is a video game, and so it has a very video gamey interface. It's got like buttons. So let's see, when you want to select what kind of thing you want to put in the world, there's a little menu, and so you click on the menu, and then you click on the build space to add it. If you want to add a stick, you select the stick, and then you click and you drag. It's like, we've been playing video games for our entire lives. We've all played thousands of hours of video games. We've played hundreds of video games. All of that informs how we design games, how we design every part of the games, what kind of games we make. And so when I started working on the new Fantastic Contraption, when we all started working on it, in the first design meeting, the first thing you have to figure out when you're making a building game with tools in it is how do you get these tools into the world? And so I was like, well, that's an easy question. I solved that one already. We'll just have a menu where you select the thing, and then you'll just in the first one, you'll click in space wherever you want to wheel, and then you'll click in space where you want to stick, and then you'll drag it to wherever you want it to be. It's like, presto, no problem, done. It's a video gamey solution. Some of the guys at Radial Games had been working in VR a little longer than we had, and they're like, well, what if we have a bucket over on the corner, and you walk over to the bucket and you grab stuff out of the bucket? And I was like, that doesn't sound like a good idea, because when I'm building something, I want to get in the groove, and I want to be working fast, and I don't want to have to walk over to this bucket every time I want to do anything and walk back. And they're like, well, what if we make the bucket a cat so it follows you around and you don't have to go way over there? Which did sound like a pretty good idea. So we decided to do both of those things. We're going to do the menu, and we're going to do the cat. And we were working on the game. We worked on the game for weeks before we actually had a Vive to try it on. So we prototyped both of them up, and then we get in on our Vive, and we all get into the game for the first time. And we try both. I tried both of them, and it is immediately, shockingly apparent that the cat is 100 times better than the video gamey interface. And this is the moment when I realized that everything is going to be different. And this is the moment that, hopefully, this is really the only moment I want you to get out of this talk, is that things are totally different. The old ways are going to be helpful, going to be very helpful for you, thinking about how we're going to go forward, but you are going to have to rethink from the beginning a lot of the things we're doing. And the bright side to that, there's a cat. And so this is how our cat works. So the bright side to that is that the new ways are way more fun than the old ways. Clicking, we've evolved for 10,000 years to use tools. We're tool users. We've only had buttons that do things for a couple thousand years, and we've only had the really abstract mouse keyboard interface for 100 years, not even. And when you let people actually move around and physically interact with stuff, it's more fun, it's more engrossing, it's more intuitive, it's a better use of the medium. This is VR with hands, and I'm only talking today about VR with hands. I'm not really talking about gaze stuff, because I think VR with hands is the future of computing, basically. So VR with hands is the reason it's so exciting and so good is because you just get to use your hands, right? There's a huge part of your brain that is dedicated to your hands and just moving them and interacting with them, and you're in a very serious way is bringing that into play. And so the advantages of taking what would have been kind of a screen that you're like plinking and plunking at, which is like, fine, it'll get the job done. But the advantages of taking that to something more physical is that like you open up this, like that's where the magic is. So I'm going to talk about some other things people are doing, some other examples of people who are getting away from kind of traditional menu stuff. JobSim is doing a lot of interesting stuff with this. I really like their cartridge system. So they have a number of jobs that you play. So in JobSim, it's the future and jobs are obsolete. So if you want to see what a job was like, you have to go to a job museum. And so to select a job, you like literally grab a cartridge and you put it in a thing, which is better than clicking something on a menu. It's one of the nice things about the cartridge solution is that you can easily see it abstracting to other problems, to like any kind of selection problems. Cartridges are nice. It's more nice to think of a world or a selection being embodied in a physical thing than it is like in a menu selection. We're like used to dealing with physical things in the real world. I really like Cloudlands. These guys are also from British Columbia, and their level select is really great. Or, sorry, this is the putter select. In mini golf, there are different size people, so they have different size putters, and so they have a really nice solution to selecting putter length. You just go up to the putters, and then you can't literally grab which. Like the best thing you would go up and you would select which putter fit you best and you would grab it off the wall. Their game's a little weird because they replace your hand with a putter, so you don't have a hand anymore. So it's kind of a nice, it's like a nice kind of halfway point. So they still get a nice physical menu, but it's not like literally a hand grab. Here's fantastic contraption. This is our level select. So in the game, you put on this helmet, and then inside the helmet, you can see this other world that is like another like spatial dimension over top of the rest of the level. And so we use these models. We use models a lot, the idea of models a lot in Fantastic Contraption. And so you see these are all models of each level. There's a level called Tumble Down. There's a model of it. You can see what it is. You can kind of see what the challenge is going to be. When you want to load it, you just place it where the old one was. And then boom, you're in the whole new world. Some nice things about the model system, is people are really used to models. They understand how to use them. You get a ton of information out of models. And you can interact with them physically. You can move them from place to place to make meaningful interactions. Also, we have 50 levels, but we only have 8 models fit on a table. So we just let you flip the table once or again, and you can flip forever to get to infinite numbers of pages. Obviously, if you literally had infinite pages, this wouldn't be a very good interface. Those are all questions we're going to have to figure out as we go. In keeping with the models, the models in Contraption, if you build something you really like, you want to save it and show it to people. So you go back into Menu World, where you'll see a model of the contraption that you've been working on that is sitting on top of the place in the level where you just saw it. And so to save it, you just literally pick it up and you put it down on a table. And then if you turn off the game, you go out for dinner, you come back, the table still has the model on it. Simple, right? We have a nice lever for like mode selects for this table, so it changes what it represents. So these are other contraptions that people on the internet have used to solve. So we can just take a look at that. We also have a lever for your friend solutions and any solutions, and kind of what we call a fire hose, which is just kind of all solutions ever made. On the model bases, we have the credit of the person who made it, and the color of the base represents what kind of solution it is, whether it was done with particularly few pieces or in some way that the game could detect was clever. You can stuff kind of a surprising amount of information in a physical thing because it has a lot of physical attributes. And we still use some text in places like the author name. Here's another Cloudlands example of how they do level select. So you'll see they have a demo which is like 9 holes. Oh no, this is the wrong video, I'm sorry. So, but you can see if you kind of look on the side of the video, at the right there's a random selection, and on the left there's a demo, and there's 2 doors. One's closed because we're just playing the demo version. But in order to select which one of those you play, you actually hit your golf ball into either demo or random. So, I mean, that's so good, right? That's such a good idea, because not only are you embedding the UI stuff in the physicality, like a physical motion, but you're making it the basic verb of your whole game, too. And so you can imagine trying to do that in like a kind of traditional on-a-screen golf game would be like a miserable idea, because the abstraction from mouse movement to golf club or keyboard to golf club is such a kind of like non-intuitive, confusing one. You could never present a player with that as the first action in the game. But when you have physical hands and you interact with the game in the same way that you interact with all of the world around you, suddenly it frees you up to do like super interesting things like this. You can make your root verbs be how you even start the game. I think that's a fantastic example of replacing a menu with a physical interaction. Cloudhead is working on the gallery. They have, I love this inventory. They've been working on VR for longer than pretty much all of us. So they've come up with really interesting solutions to a lot of stuff. So their inventory, you can see, it's literally a backpack you pull off your back. So while you're walking around, you can pull your hand behind your back at any time, pull your backpack out, and then take stuff out of it, just like it was a real backpack. Obviously, it's a little better than a real backpack, like it floats in midair. This is also a really good example of kind of like a half and half interface. So originally, they started out with literally just a backpack that you would put stuff in, and it didn't have, and it had as much space as like the backpack has in space. But I assume they discovered they wanted to put more stuff in their backpack than they could like literally fit in the physical space. So they kind of go half backpack and half into an abstracted menu. So I think that's a really good example that there's probably going to be like a nice, probably some nice middle ground a lot of the time between what is a like traditional menu and what is like a more physical representation of that. That it's, you know, it's going to be okay to not, maybe you can't make it like full physical representation of what you want to do. Maybe you have to go halfway, and that's like not the end of the world. So in Fantastic Contraption, the way we use shortcuts is, so this is the same idea as the backpack. And the shortcuts idea, we first saw the idea, Valve had a demo where you had, you were shooting an arrow. So you'd shoot an arrow, and then to get a new arrow, you'd reach behind your back and pull out another arrow from your kind of invisible quiver. And so a lot of people have jumped on this idea because it's a fantastic idea. So the cat is usually, we use the cat to move, to get tools and introduce tools into the world. But that kind of original objection that I had, which was like, I don't really want to like walk to the cat all the time, kind of holds up. So for expert players, like we don't even tutorialize this. This is the only way you can discover these shortcuts is if you go onto like a forum or if you find them yourself, which is very unlikely. But this is another super easy takeaway from this talk, that these shortcuts are just going to be like an absolute standard. Like everybody in every game is going to have like shortcuts. This is going to be a big inventory management stuff, so it's easy to like, you know, gun games, it's obvious, like you'll just reach for this, like, yeah, I keep like my shotgun over here and I keep my pistol over here. And in Fantastic Contraption, we keep shortcuts. Our major ones are, you can see me here using the wheel on the top of the head. And then we say, when we do demos, we say, yeah, take the ninja sword out from behind your back. And that's where we keep the shortcuts in the back. We also have shortcuts peppered around your head. So we use ones for 2 ears. We also use one coming out of your mouth. Shortcuts are super awesome, and everyone's going to use it, and they're fantastic. Unfortunately, obviously, when people start finding them, sometimes they start like trying to grab stuff out of their ass, and I would love to put a shortcut there, but obviously we only track the head, so shortcuts are always going to be clustered around the head. Sorry. Oh yeah, so a super interesting idea from JobSim is the idea of eating as an interface. So this is their exit burrito. JobSim is like super wacky, crazy game, so they can get away with like a lot of stuff. So you can see, You can see the way you exit a job is you eat the burrito that has exit written on it in hot sauce, and then it has rice confirming, like rice spells out really as a confirmation. So you have to take the second bite to exit the game, which is genius. So JobSim, maybe we're thinking about, JobSim has said that we can put the exit burrito in our game. So if you feel like making the exit burrito a standard in VR, I think that'd be great. I like the idea of eating. I think eating is actually a super interesting idea in VR. One that we really want to do, I think it'll make a lot of sense to adding eating for things that change the player in some way. So a really good example that we haven't done yet, but I really want to do, is in Fantastic Contraption. Obviously, we've got the nice big room scale where you like build at the same size as you are. But we also want to do, for people with smaller spaces, we want to do a scale where you're like sitting at a desk and playing and moving things around. We also really like something we call floor scale, which is we shrink the game down and then you sit cross-legged on the floor and play like you were a kid playing with Legos. It feels really nice. And a really obvious way to move between those states would be to like eat kind of a Lewis Carrollian mushroom to change down or to get bigger. I think stuff like, I'm actually really excited about the idea of eating. There's obviously like, raises one of the weirder questions in VR, like, are you going to teach kids to start eating mushrooms? Because that's a terrible thing to teach. There's like literally those weird questions that we're all going to have to figure out how to answer. So those are kind of the prominent examples of UI stuff that people are doing right now. And I think the most interesting stuff is obviously it's not like traditional game UI in most ways. But I think it has a lot more to do with industrial design. So people that design espresso machines and cars and like physical objects. And I actually think that industrial designers are probably going to be the ones that come in and do the best work in this field. So in industrial design, they have schools and they have entire giant companies that do it, and they're good ones and bad ones and very well paid, and tons of magazines dedicated to industrial design, and they're all really good at it. And suddenly we have a raft of problems that are industrial design problems. I think it's going to be challenging for industrial design for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we don't have like physical things to touch. We don't have physical texture, although we can kind of fake it. We don't have like resistance on switches, although we can kind of fake it a little bit. Industrial design's probably going to be a little weird when the user can literally put their face inside whatever you're designing. But there's also advantages to industrial designers, like I used to subscribe to a bunch of design blogs, and you end up seeing people designing fantastic, amazing things, but they never get made because the barrier to actually making an espresso machine is huge. Most of those barriers in VR go away, so it's much easier to make something in a game than it is to literally manufacture something. So I think it's likely that in the future, you should basically start partnering with an industrial designer or start reading about industrial design, because that's an incredibly deep field that they know a lot about, and that's kind of going to become suddenly important for us. So that's those are briefly those are my core important thoughts on what we've kind of found in Fantastic Contraption, trying as hard as we could to get rid of all the menus. It's actually too bad we got rid of all the menus, because we used to have, the way we pop up a menu is we had an insect that would like fly around beside you. And then, because you don't have an escape button in VR very well, so if you want to like bring up the menu, like how do you get to it? So we had this insect that flew around you, and you kind of try to stay off to the side, but if you look quickly, he would look at you and kind of pause there before he ran away, and if you smacked him, that would like bring up the physical menu. So I would love to see, it felt really good, and I really miss my like insect flying bug friend. So if you decide that you do need like an escape menu, you should do that, because I like him and I want him back. But I think that's just what's really exciting about where we are right now. Like, none of us know what's going to happen. All we know is the experiments that we in this room have done and our peers have done and have shared with us. And this is like hour 0. We're going to, all the standards that are going to come about haven't been invented yet. Like, we in this room are responsible for that. We get to watch it happen. And I just couldn't be more excited to see what all of us are going to do. And that's my talk. So we have a couple minutes for questions if you come up to the microphone and ask them.
I'm really intrigued by the shortcuts idea, and having seen how touchy motion sensors in games can be. How accurate did you find that the tracking for the shortcuts was? How general did you have to be in, this space is a shortcut versus this space? Yeah,
so that's less an issue of both Oculus and Vive have very good hand tracking. So that's not so much I've found that's a problem of physical controller tracking, but it's definitely a problem in terms of how players understand a shortcut. Because the sword example, the sword metaphor, you would usually reach back until you feel a sword, but there is not one there. So different shortcuts have to be different sizes. The ear ones are actually the smallest, more reliable, because they're it's pretty easy to get right next to your ears. People have a lot of trouble getting close to their mouth for ones. Our mouth one we don't use very aggressively. It's not really, it's kind of like a nice to have thing. It's not like a tool. The shoulder ones are the trickiest. So the shoulder ones, the biggest problem with the shoulder ones is when I'm doing this, my head is not, usually you design shortcuts for your head being square against your shoulders. So it's right there. But if I'm working on something, or if I'm leaning down at a weird angle, then suddenly my shoulder is not where it is if I'm standing straight. So you have to be much more aggressive with your shoulder shortcuts than you do with the rest of your head shortcuts. Question? Sorry, on this side.
So is pagination and creative use of pagination going to be enough to overcome data density issues, or do you think there are going to be flat-out limitations for how many different dimensions of information you can send out?
Yeah, so definitely the second one. There are going to be serious problems, especially so even in the fantastic contraption UI that we have now, I don't think you can see it in any of these videos, but we have, when you save something online, so the original fantastic contraption, sharing contraptions was a really important part of it. And since you were on your computer, we could just make a link and we could share, you could put that in a forum or email it to someone and then they could jump in that. It was really easy. So in VR, especially now, since we haven't figured out how VR even interacts with the internet yet, that'll all happen. But right now, we don't have any of that. We want you to be able to tell, let's see. Oh yeah, wait. That wasn't pause, that was continue. So one way we're trying to combat that is to give every contraption a name. And so you don't name it as a player, because literally text input in VR is still unsolved. So we give it a random adjective and a random noun. So as soon as you save a contraption, so let's see, if you look, so when he flips the switch, and if you read on the bases, you'll see all impulse and circuit basket and detailed marmot. So he's going to load circular basket. So that's a name we randomly assign every online contraption. And so eventually we'll have an interface for you swapping, choosing between all of those adjectives and nouns and select them. At the moment, it's still useful because if I go to my friend's contraptions, Gord can be oh man, angry hippopotamus is so cool, you should go check it out. So at least I can go to my friends and select one of them. That's, there are so many problems in terms of sorting information, obviously. And we're not solving those by any stretch. This is a solution that like won't scale particularly well, that like isn't great for content discovery, and like I, off the top of my head, don't have solutions to those.
Thanks.
Hey, so I think like the idea of a physical interface to interact with things is amazing, but how does it deal with the pace of the UX? Are players more patient in VR when they're interacting with a physical thing, like putting on a helmet versus start up X to restart?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. I think I kind of feel like this is in the same genre of like are people going to want to move around in VR? Like we're so used to just playing video games, sitting on our couch with a controller kind of questions. And it turns out like we just think about physical space and doing physical things like differently. So like I had actually never thought about picking up the helmet being slower than hitting a button until you, and I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times until you mentioned it. Obviously a big physical action like walking to the cat we like thought about removing. But I think for some reason, since we're like used to doing physical things more, like I had like weirdly not thought about it that much. So I guess I think you think about it differently, and so you end up giving things a lot of like slack, if you want to put it that way. Or
Yeah, sure. Right, thanks.
yeah.
My question is actually a bit related to that last one, which is about the sort of ergonomics of VR interfaces generally compared to, sub-millimeter movements of your thumbs, which is what everybody's used to, just mostly in terms of sustainability of these experiences. Think about the length of time I spent playing Fantastic Contraption. And imagining doing that under those physical circumstances with all this labor required to get stuff together. And just did you find that was an axis you controlled for or tried to optimize for, sort of how efficient it was to do things, or how sustainable an experience you were creating? And just what was your approach to that whole question?
So obviously, for us, the saving and loading stuff is you can have a lot more effort to be involved in that because it's a lot less common in action. But for the like meat and potatoes building stuff, that's super important. One of the nice things, so we added the shortcuts to get around that, but actually one of the nice things about having the cat and using the cat and like including a little more physical labor in the game is it changes the way you feel about the game. Like that's your game feel, right? Like how the player is moving around in the space is now a huge part of your game feel, and it's nice to it's even nice to like problem solve those problems in 3D space. So like if you're building an intricate thing over here and you don't know about the shortcuts yet, people will like, you can move the cat, which is great, but sometimes like people don't want to move the cat, or like they're not in the habit of moving the cat, and you'll see people like take out 4 sticks and like push them over here, and then they'll walk over here and like take off that pile. And so like those are really nice. It's nice to see people kind of like solve their problems in the same way. I think that's all. You definitely have to think about how much time and labor things are going to take versus how often people are going to be doing those actions, and then how fun it is to do those actions, right? The like, kind of early in VR, the like, people are going to want to sit on the couch and play their games, not walk around. Well, it's like, squash and soccer are doing pretty good. Like, people like to move around.
So I was wondering if you had...
OK, last question, sorry.
Hopefully it's a good one. Have you thought about tracking actual physical objects like your butt, or like, a cat on the ground that you could physically pick up?
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. When we do the mixed reality stuff, we have a tracked camera on here, so we tape a controller onto a camera and move it. I've played with some people who have done some like tracking of like physical stuff, and it's like really, really neat, especially if you have like, I don't really have any interesting stuff up here, but like if you have a bottle that is like one-to-one, like looks like and feels like the bottle, it's really cool. I think that's a great future tech question. Like, what are we going to do with that? And are we going to do stuff with that? Like, is that going to be the problem of like nobody's going to buy a water bottle peripheral? Like.
Well, or like a tag you could put on it.
Yeah. I think that's a great question that I don't know the answer to. You should go figure it out, I guess.
Thanks.
All right, thanks for that time. So thanks very much, everybody.